Well, greetings. I'm Dr. Avis Williams, the proud superintendent for NOLA Public Schools, and this is our final episode of Talk Supt for this year. And if you've been watching Talk Supt Roundtable, you have seen these amazing young people really lean into talking about mental health, talking about wellness, talking about trauma and the crime in our community and what we all can do to improve. And of course, I've got Courtney Washington, our Chief Communications Officer, with us. How are you?
Hey, Doc, I am great, and I am super excited to be here in person for Talk Supt and in this podcast format. How wonderful is this?
Yes, absolutely. And then we also have Dr. Jennifer Vegno with us. How are you today?
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are super excited. So today, not only are we going to hear from our young people, but we're also going to hear from Dr. Vegno, and she's going to drop some knowledge for us around some data and statistics that I think will be helpful for us to really frame where we are as it relates to mental health, wellness, and really quality of life, because that's one of the things that I really want us to focus on as we wrap up our conversation today, is looking at the quality of life within our community and how all of us can play a role in improving it. But before we get to that, let's have our young people introduce themselves. And we all are going to go around and we're going to introduce ourselves. And I want you guys to share your name and your grade. And then I also want you to describe your feelings about the future of New Orleans in a word or a phrase. You know, how are you feeling in terms of the future of New Orleans as you introduce yourself? And why don't we start over here?
Okay, hello, my name is Anthony Lee. I'm a 11th grader here in the car, rising senior. And I feel like New Orleans is growing. I just feel like it takes time, but I feel like we're growing.
It's a good word. Love it.
Hi, I'm Zayden Hills. I'm a 10th grader in the car. And if I had to say one word, it would be potential for the future of New Orleans.
I love that. We're going to skip over here to Zariah, and then we'll go around.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jariah Richardson, and I am a 12th grader. I am a soon-to-be graduate, and one word that I have to describe New Orleans would be changing. Like, I feel like it's a forever changing place, no matter what type of change it is.
That's good. I like that.
Hello, my name is Jordan Rogers, and I am also a 10th grader. And to describe New Orleans in its current state, I would like to say that it's clouded.
Yeah, well, maybe we can peel back some of the later layers on that. Clouded. I like that, though.
Hi, my name is Courtney Delatorre. I'm a 10th grader here at Edna Carr, and I feel like New Orleans' future is prosperous. I feel like there will be a change.
Love it.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Washington, Chief Communications and Community Affairs for NOLA PS, and I mirror you guys' sentiment. I'm confident about the positive change that is taking place in our city, especially through formats like this, us uplifting student voice and bringing them to the table for that positive change.
Very good. And again, I'm Dr. Avis Williams, superintendent, and despite my concerns that I do have, I'm also very optimistic. And being able to hear and listen and to learn with our young people, with our scholars, is what gives me optimism. Dr. Vegno?
Well, thanks, y'all. I'm Jenna Vegno. I'm the director of the health department at the city. I'm also an ER doctor and a mom of several teenagers. And being with you all here today and being with my kids and just knowing the work that we're trying to do, I think I'm hopeful. Despite the challenges, I'm hopeful.
Very good. And you can keep your mic on, Dr. Vegno, because we want to hear from your perspective. So we've had a lot of conversations about our community and about the impact that the state of our community has had on our young people. What would you say about the state of our community from a data standpoint or just from your observations as a medical professional?
Yeah, well, the great thing about working at the New Orleans Health Department is that we have a really simple mission, and that is to protect and promote the health of everybody in our community. In order to do that, we need to understand what are our assets, how are we healthy, and then all of the many ways that we're not healthy and the reasons why. And it's a lot more complicated than just, well, my grandma had cancer, so maybe I'm at risk of cancer, right? Or so-and-so smoked, so they got heart disease, that sort of thing. The things that make us unhealthy in New Orleans and in America don't really have much to do with our family history or our bodies or what's really inside us. It's all the things that's around us. It's, do we have access to good transportation? Do we have access to a great education like we're getting here at Carr? Do we have streets that work and lights that work and ability to get a good paying job? And do we live in a food desert, or do we have a grocery store that we can get fresh fruit at? So in a lot of these things, I will tell you, I'll be honest with you, New Orleans falls short. We have not invested in people and the things that we need to really be a thriving community, both health-wise and economically, right? Because when you invest in one, you get a benefit for the other. So a lot of the programs that we're trying to do are, how do we get at that? How do we get in the fact that we're a very food insecure city, and the city that has better food than anywhere else in New Orleans, right? That doesn't make any sense. How do we get that we have such a big gap in income between the highest earners and the lowest earners? How do we address that? Because if you don't have enough money to buy your basic needs, you certainly aren't going to have enough to take care of your health. How do we deal with violent crime? Guns are the number one cause of death in children in America and in New Orleans. So for me, there's no bigger public health emergency than figuring out how do we stop this epidemic of violence, because we know it is killing young people, and I don't have to tell you all that, I'm sure, at a rate that is far greater. You know, we fixed measles and we fixed mumps and we made cars safer. We've got to address that, because we're basically robbing our city of some of the brightest minds before they even have a chance to get started. So there's a lot of challenges, but there's so much beauty and joy and hope in this community that there are an awful lot of people like yourself who are fighting to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked about that through the lens of systems, because and the systems all work together, whether it's the healthcare, the education system, housing, and certainly when we think about crime within our city, there are systems that impact that. What would be one thing that you would say to our young people? You mentioned joy, and especially when we know that we've got young people who are pouring some positive things in our community. What message would you say to our young people as it relates to the state of our community?
Yeah, I would say that in many ways you all are smarter than us, right? Because you see and feel what the issues are, and you come up with really creative ways to overcome them. We look for evidence-based solutions if we're going to tackle violence in any kind of meaningful way, and not just for this year, but for 30 years. Then we have to look at evidence-based. And one of those, we know that programs that help youth develop are significant in reducing the likelihood that youth will be shot, youth will experience violence. So obviously you guys are involved because you're here. Getting your friends, your neighbors, the kid that lives on the other street to be involved in something, anything, that's a potential lifesaver, right? And it could be anything. It could be, somebody's doing, a craft club. Somebody's got a video game club. Somebody has a basketball league. Look at your classmates. You know the ones that have it rough, right? You know the ones that need something. How can you get them in to something that's going to positively impact their life? You might not be able to fix everything that's going on at home, but in some cases, that one thing could really, really make a difference.
Yeah, and I appreciate you lifting that up. One of the things I often say is that when we think about the problems in our community, it's not your issue to solve, but you absolutely deserve a seat at the table as we're having these discussions. And you have your seat at the table. And so I want to engage our scholars now. And if you have any questions or however you want to weigh in, go ahead.
So, as some of you may know, I'm on a basketball team, and I get to see a lot of different athletes, and I also get to spend time and get to know people as I move throughout my own athletic journey. And one thing that I do see on the regular is my teammates struggling. Like, many of them, they will say, oh, can you help me with this? Like, yes, sometimes, for example, everyone needs a ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, oh, my mom can't come pick me up. But some of my teammates actually, especially when I started high school last year, a lot of them just stayed by themselves. Like, they didn't have a car, but they stayed at home by themselves. And so it's like, you never really know what's going on at your teammate's household or anything, but you can still see that shadow coming and following them and how it affects them as a person and as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it affects everyone. It's like a radiating shadow that just multiplies.
That gives me goosebumps hearing you say that, because I get that, a radiating shadow, and even though it's not necessarily happening to you, it still has an impact, and especially when it's a friend and a teammate. Yeah, I appreciate you lifting that up, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all supporting each other, especially when you're talking about a sports team, you know, and we may not have the answers to be able to fix that when it's not in your own household. And that's where the community does come in. And that's why I'm always trying to figure out how we lean into partnerships, you know, because, again, not your problem to solve, but that's your friend, right? So I definitely appreciate you lifting that up. Go ahead, Jariah.
I have a question. It's about, as adults, how do you feel social media plays a part in rising mental health crisis and the youth violence, all of those type of things?
Well, there's no question that there isn't a result. In fact, just this morning, I was listening to a report that 2012 is really when social media started to take off. And when we look at surveys of loneliness took off in a very, similar direction. And I think there's no question that there is a result, even though social media is supposed to make you feel connected. And many times it's isolating, right? Because you think, well, everybody else is doing this and I'm here doing that, right? We know that social media, and then plus the effects of the pandemic, had a really, really big toll on children's mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's thoughts of suicide. And again, I say that because I know the data clinically, but I had four teenagers during
That's real
COVID.
data.
And what you all went through was rough. And so, unfortunately, the horse is out of the barn with social media. I don't think any of y'all are going to give up TikTok or Snapchat, right? If I asked you to. We have to figure out, how do we make it safer so that when you are engaging, because it does have some benefits, right? It's nice to be able to constantly chat with your friends. We used to have to do it on the phone, and then our mom would yell at us to get off the phone. But how do we protect and highlight the good things about social media? But really, we got to be honest about the bad things, right? And again, it all goes to, like, when your friend is upset because somebody said something on social media, right? How can we help y'all be advocates to rectify that, so that being sad about it doesn't transform into something worse?
Yeah, and I will add too that this whole notion, FOMO, fear of missing out, that that's a social media thing, right? And that didn't exist 15 or 20 years ago, and it's real. I've even had it a couple of times where I see friends and colleagues who are involved in certain activities that they're posting on social media. And so one of the things that I also wonder about is, how do we make sure that we're well and that our young people are well, so that they don't feel the negative impact from that standpoint? Because when you're dealing with something like fear of missing out, that may not necessarily have anything to do with cyberbullying or someone explicitly doing something negative to you, but it does still impact you if your headspace is not in the right place.
I just wanted to say that when it comes to social media, I feel like at this time period, we are all smart enough and developed enough to understand and be able to take things in account just for our own mental and physical safety. As parents, I feel like at some points in time, it's smart for a parent to just enlighten a child. Like when I was growing up, a military family, they're going to tell me what it is and what it isn't. So I walk around, Jordan, not everyone's going to be your friend. Jordan, not everyone's going to have their best interest. And I mean, your best interest. And Jordan, not everyone is going to agree or disagree or do anything in your favor. It's up to you. And some people aren't raised like that. So it's the small things and everything that goes on within the world generally that could affect someone really bad. And it might not affect everyone the same way depending on how they were raised.
I agree. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I feel like just in case you don't have that teaching from your parents or you don't have those things, I feel like those are when the resources from school should come in. Sometimes I feel like we should have like mental health days or counselors, well, our counselors at Edna Carr check up on us when we're either failing or not even when we're not failing or when they just see us moping. You know, it's those things when it comes to body language. You can tell when something's off, and I constantly say they capture that and they try and see what's wrong, see what's this, because they know it spirals into different other issues. So I feel like more schools having it, even in middle schools, having it to where they check up on more of their students, that can honestly help that isolation that can be caused from social media or different issues, even from your home.
Yeah, you guys spend a lot of time at school too, right? You know, so even if home was ideal, it still doesn't take the place of the fact that you're here for at least 6 or 7, 8 hours, sometimes more for our athletes. I see that, Jordan, I know. So yeah, that's a really good point. And that's where we do rely on our teachers and counselors and other critical friends that might even be your colleagues as students.
Yeah, and I'll say, you all do have so many resources in our schools. You just have to, if you're lucky enough to have somebody notice if you're having a bad day, but we have to get over the stigma of asking for help. And, I'm an ER doctor, so I see the consequences of this all the time. It's, guys who are in their 50s who, they haven't been feeling well for a while, but, they didn't want to ask for help. They didn't want to go to the doctor. They could fix it themselves. By the time they come to see me, it's become a much bigger problem, right? And I think we just have to get over that stigma of accepting help, whether it's, I'm not feeling well physically or I'm not feeling well mentally. I don't know what to do. I've got a real problem and I don't know where to go. Given that burden, sharing that burden with someone, with an adult who cares about you, who you trust, if it's in the school or wherever it is, that's treatment, right? And that's a real critical step.
Okay, so can y'all hear me? Okay, so I want to talk, and I want to go back to what you had said when you were first talking, when you were like, being healthy isn't really about like, oh, I don't feel well. It's more about like, oh, I can't find a ride. Because that in itself is like, that impacts us kids more than how we actually feel. Because it's easy to get over a headache. It's easy to get over a cold. But I feel like it's not easy to get over the little things, like the things that we can't control. Like if I can't find a ride every day, eventually that's going to become draining because I have to fend for myself and find it for myself, and we shouldn't have to do that. And I feel like as like our parents, like they try their best, but I feel like it should be like, if I know my child's going somewhere, then I need to make sure that they have a way back home and they have a way, if I can't get them, let my sister go get them or let somebody else go get them. I just feel like as parents, they need to do that. And I feel like it's not even about the parents sometimes. Like sometimes it's things that we don't want to speak up about. Like you said, we need to ask for help. Like in school, if we feel like we're failing a class, a lot of us don't want to go to our teachers and ask our teachers, can you help me? Like a lot of us are really stubborn. And I feel like we as teenagers, like young adults, we need to get over that because eventually you're going to need help. Like you want to pass. You want to keep your rank. You want your GPA to stay high. So I feel like as young adults, we just need to work on that. Because if we work on that, then we'll become healthier without even knowing that we're becoming healthier. Like, it's just the little things that we all need to pay attention to and get, like, right with the motions with it. And I feel like we'll progress when we realize that we need to do that.
I feel like I feel as though it's more easier said than done. I do agree with what you said, Anthony, that we should get over the stigma for asking for help, but it comes from home. I constantly say issues that happen in youth, middle school or high school, it does stem from a problem at home. And our parents, I feel like some parents do their best from what they were shown. There's always going to be improvement. There's no pamphlet to raise a child. However, I do feel as though it stems from home, but I feel like that's where the accessibility to resources at school should be to fix those problems. I feel like us as youth, if we're only shown to hide our emotions, if we're only shown to just cast it out, how would you shed light in? It's one of those things where that's what school needs to be there for, to try and help us grow. So as we become young adults, we wouldn't have these problems, or it wouldn't develop, as you say.
Yeah, that was so well said, both of you. And I will just say that one thing that I am clear on is that families can't give what they don't have. And, to your point, there is an expectation that family, that parents are taking care of certain needs from our, for our scholars. But we all know that that's sometimes a challenge too. So I appreciate you lifting that up.
I want to go back to what you were saying about people asking for help. I just want people to know that it's okay to not be okay, but what's not okay is just sitting there dwelling in your sorrows and in your pain. And I feel that sometimes people are ashamed or embarrassed of their mental health. That's why they don't go talk to people about it, because they might feel that other people might think they're looking for attention or something, but that's never the case. You just have to find the right person to talk to, because there's always somebody out there to help you get through whatever you're going through.
Yeah, and I think one of the good things we've seen over the last couple of years is that people are starting to speak up more about mental health, whether you're a star athlete or a singer or a prince. People are coming forward and saying, I really struggled with this, because let's be honest, we all have somebody in our family who has struggled mightily with mental health. And I think we've all probably struggled to some degree with it. So why are we hiding it if it's something that everybody does? And so I really like to see when people that are in the media that maybe, teenagers looked up to are normalizing the conversation, saying, yeah, I went to a therapist, or yeah, I really struggled with depression, and I tried this meditation and it really helped, and maybe it can help you too. I'm hopeful that sparks more conversation among your generation. Certainly wasn't the case for our generation, but I'm hopeful. My teenagers and their friends talk about it a lot, and I'm thrilled about that, because if you're talking about it, then that just helps lighten that burden, and you're not alone.
Okay. So I had a question that stemmed from some of the things that you guys said, like what Anthony said about little things, and I thought like that adds to stress. And what Courtney said about it's okay to not be okay, I think as teenagers we have a lot of people who are not seeking help, and instead they're using unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think over the last few years we've seen a huge increase in like adolescent drug use. And I know on a developing brain that has a huge effect. So my question was really like, do you think like the increased drug use it's very easy to have access to drugs as teenagers. Does that have an effect on the crime rate as well?
Well, you're absolutely right about the developing brain. And the effects of using drugs are much more harmful on a young person because they haven't yet developed all the neural pathways. I mean, they're harmful for an adult. Mm-hmm. But I do think that, what we call it in the medical field is self-medicating, right? You have you're struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever it is, even more serious mental health disorders. You don't know how to get help. You don't get help. You're not talking to a therapist or on, a doctor's care with approved meds. And so you take that pill in an attempt to feel better. And maybe you do for a very little short while, but it's really not worth the long term. But at that point, you're kind of in a cycle that's very, very hard to break. I think crime is so complex and there's so many different reasons for crime. Certainly, with increasing drug use and with the very, very dangerous drugs right now, like fentanyl, that are in everything, in pills, in anything you can imagine, that drug trade has spawned an awful lot of violence, right? So that is sort of an indirect route of just how these things, it's underlying. We are all hurting as a society, and the things that we're doing to try to get out of that is just making the problem worse.
Okay, so I want to speak on that. I feel like as teenagers, since like some of our teenagers, like somebody said it earlier, but you can only teach what you're taught. Like, if our parents were taught to put away your feelings, hide your feelings, not show your feelings, like, do everything you can to not let the next person know that you're not okay, I feel like that just stems from what you're taught. Like, if you were taught that way, then they're going to keep on continuing that cycle. But I feel like it's up to us to break it. If we feel like that's not right, then we have enough power to say this isn't right. Like, we have enough power to go to our peers and say, I don't think that we should do this way. I think that we should actually change the narrative. I think that we should, instead of hiding it, go to the next person and say, are you okay today? Like, how are you feeling? Do you need a hug? Because a lot of our teenagers need hugs. Like, I don't think people realize that that's important, but it really is. It's something as simple as that. And I feel like the drug use, that's another thing that's passed down, because I feel like if you see your parents smoking every day, if you see your parents taking pills every day, like, you're just going to be like, maybe that's what I'm meant to do. And that's not what you're meant to do. Like, you're young. Like, that really does have an effect on your brain, because you're so young, you already think, oh, that's what I got to do when I get older. But that's not what you have to do when you get older. And I feel like if we teach each other that that's not what we have to do, then that would lead to less crime, because I feel like the drugs just make you more angry. I just feel like drugs just make you feel like why this person looking at me like that, or like why this person, why they talking to me like that. Like, they could be talking normal, but it's like when you get drugs in your system and the medicine starts getting to you, you start feeling like everybody's attacking you. And I feel like that's what's really like starting a problem and making all this violence worse. So I feel like drugs really do have a big impact on the whole violence rate. Like, violence comes from anything, but I really feel like if you add drugs to the equation, okay, now it's just going to get 10 times worse. So I feel like drugs are a problem. You can only teach what you're taught, and that's why I just feel like kids need to listen to this podcast and realize that we are the change. Like, we're the ones that need to stand up for ourselves and say, this isn't right. We need to change this so that we can be better than our parents. And we can only really make our parents proud by doing better, being different. And so many people want to make their parents proud, but you have to actually change in order to really make them proud.
Love it. Oh my God. So I love the change the narrative. I love the needing hugs.
Right.
That's good stuff. Thank you for that.
And I was going to add, it doesn't change as you get older either. Before we started, I told you guys about adulting. It's hard adulting, and that needing that hug is
Definitely
is an everyday thing. So when we're done, if you guys want a hug, I want a hug too. One last thing before we pivot. I think you were going to say something.
Okay, I was going to say that I feel as though drugs also, when you have limited resources, especially in New Orleans, I feel like we have more resources than ever due to social media and different aspects like podcasts and different things that raise the mental health awareness. However, I do feel when you add drugs to the equation, not only I feel like it's a horrible self-coping to different problems and trauma, but I also feel as though it's how people feel it's their only way out. I do agree with Anthony. People do think that drugs is their only way out, not only taking them, but also selling them. People feel like there are limited careers for them, either because they're not smart enough, which I don't feel like that's the thing. We all are good in something. But I feel like with teenagers especially, or even middle schoolers, impressionable minds, not knowing that the world is so open that you can do anything with just YouTube, I feel as though that they limit themselves to that. And I do feel like we are the change. However, I feel like there should be more programs to widen more teenagers or even middle schoolers to think or trigger the mind, oh, well, I don't have to sell drugs. I could just be a barber, or different activities or things like that.
Good. So you guys made it clear what time lunch was before we got started, too. So I'm being mindful of that. But before we pivot again, I'm going to pitch it over to Jariah.
Okay, I agree with what Zayden and Anthony are saying, but I think it's important also when you see someone who is choosing to use those coping mechanisms that you don't beat them up about those choices, like, because that's not going to change anything in the situation, because they're trying their best at the same time. So it's important to empower them and show them that there are different options than just talking down on them and like beating them up about it, because that's not going to do anything but make them more stressed out or make the situation worse.
Y'all, this is such a profound conversation. I hate to even end it. This is just the opportunity that you guys have to express, to share your awareness now at this age is just so, it's touching. I'm holding back the fluttering in my, in my stomach and the tears, because at your age, I couldn't name it, couldn't call it what it is. And social media wasn't around. It was harder to connect. Dr. Vegno said it, phone, three-way, parents calling. But the fact that you guys are able to name what it is, you are aware of what you need and the experiences of yourselves as well as your peers. So let's pivot to the call to action. Just really quickly, what is the call to action? What is it that we need to leave here today on the table for people to know that you need to be better, to have a better future, to have a better New Orleans? What is it that you need? What's the call to action?
I would say, to start off, that whether you know what's wrong or if you don't know what's wrong, because it's absolutely okay to not know what's wrong. You could wake up and feel some type of way, and that's okay. You're normal, you're human, and you're not going to be perfect. But I feel like it's vital for you to understand that no matter what you're going through and no matter what you feel, that there's always going to be somebody in your corner for you to talk to. A lot of people probably go through the same thing that you don't even know. You could see someone walk through with a smile every day, and they could be going through the worst time of their life. So if you really think about it, and if you're okay, because you don't have to be comfortable with opening up, but I feel like for you to become better, for you to understand your problem, there has to be a different insight for you to get a well-rounded view. Because thinking on your emotions, sometimes they feel good for the moment, but when you miss out on that piece of logic, it's kind of like self-sabotage. So it's great to just be smart and just to think for you.
Okay, I want to go next. I feel like a call to action is to go back to what Jariah said. Don't judge people for what they are doing, because everybody in the end is trying their best. Like, we may not see it, like we may be like, oh, they're a drug abuser, but they're trying their best. Like, some people have to do, like, they don't have to, but some people feel like that's what they have to do to get through. And I feel like judging them, constantly tearing them down, like, oh, you're a drug abuser, that's not going to make the situation any better. So I feel like that's another call to action. We just need to be more careful about what we choose to say to others, and we need to carefully analyze situations before just digging into them and just seeing them, because it could look like something. It could always look a certain way, but it really could be another way. So I feel like a call to action would just be taking your time to see what it really is before you really just beat someone up for what they are doing. And that's like for adults, kids. Like, I feel like you can't beat up your classmate because they're failing. They are trying their best. Like, everybody in the end is really trying. So I feel like just realize that everybody's trying, because you're going to have a bad day eventually.
Yep.
And you wouldn't want somebody tearing you down for everything that you're doing. So I just feel like you just need to give them that same energy in return.
Yep.
And I want to add to what Anthony said, because I think it's important to understand that looks can be deceiving, and with social media, everyone is going to present their best selves, and it's going to look perfect, but that doesn't mean that that's exactly what it is. Like, you can't base your life off what someone else is doing on social media, because all that will cause is you to have mental health problems, because you have to live life on your own pace. Like, just because someone else, you're not in the same position as someone else, doesn't mean that you're not doing the best for your situation. Like, it's important not to compare yourself to others, because that leads to a lot of like commotion and drama.
Yep. Anybody else? Another call to action.
One more thing I want to say. Like she said, don't compare yourself to others. But another thing, I feel like we all need to be a backbone for one another. I feel like we need to realize that we can lean on each other, like if we are having a bad day. Like me personally, I know that I have people that I could go to and just be like, today I'm just not having a good day. And they're going to tell me like, that's okay. And I feel like we need to do that for each other.
Yep.
Like students need to do that for each other. Adults need to do that for each other. I could do it for my mom could do it for me. I feel like it should just be, we all need to feel like we are a community.
Yep.
And as like New Orleans, we are a community, and most times we realize that, but it's like with the little things we don't realize. Like we're always so busy on competition that we're not really seeing that we all need each other in the end.
Yep.
Like we could compete all we want, but one day I'm gonna need you, and one day you're gonna need me. So we might not see it now, but we do need to realize that I can call on you and you can call on me, and we all need one another.
To piggyback off of what Anthony said, I do feel like we all, need to realize that we all need to unite on this issue, since it's such a massive issue that has been consistent in longevity. I do feel as though like going forward, I feel like sometimes the youth or maybe adults, we're so sectioned off. It feels like due to generations, it feels like we don't touch upon different issues in ourselves. So I feel like maybe like this, having a podcast, it shows youth and it shows adults that you can have these conversations with adults and kids at the same table.
Yep.
I feel like we're all are even level when it comes to how things impact us. So to address that and to push that, yeah, you have bills and you have all these things, but your child also go through that. And that's vice versa for youth as well. Youth need to understand that adults still struggle with mental health for a long period of time. So I feel like for both of us to keep inconsistent that no matter your age bracket, you still deal with mental health on both youth and adults. I feel like that's very important, especially when it comes to parents and kids. Because I feel like when it comes to me and my mom, we are able to have this conversation, but not everybody have the parents that are well enough open. So if we could lift that burden or that curtain off of youth and adults being separate when it comes to mental health, I feel like that would be very good.
Yep. I like it. Oh, Courtney.
Okay, so I want people to know that when one door closed, another one will always open, and that everyone needs to know their breaking point and what causes them stress. And if you want to build and move on from that stress, you need to let go of it. Like, you need to let go of whatever is bringing you pain, whatever is bringing toxicity into your life, no matter how much you love doing it or you love that person. If it's bringing you pain, you need to let go of it. You need to love you more than, because nobody could love you more than you love yourself. You can't love somebody else more than you love yourself. So you just have to put yourself first.
Jariah?
I wanted to add on to what Zayden was saying when he said it feels like it's separated. I feel like as a community, for us to fix a problem within the community, we would have to act as one. And right now, it's a very strong disconnect between our generation and the older generation. It's like, instead of trying to fix the problems and coming up with solutions, it's like they just blame everything on us. And back to what I said earlier, you can't help someone by just belittling them and continuing to like blame them and put shame onto them. That's not going to help the problem. All that's going to do is continue to fuel that disconnect, and then the issues will never be fixed. So in order for us to fix the problems that are going on in New Orleans, we will have to become one, because you can't fix a problem that's a problem across the whole community if we're not moving as a whole.
Love it, love it, love it. So Dr. Avegno, do you see why I wanted you to meet these amazing young people?
This is the best thing I've done all day, maybe all week too.
Right, absolutely. So what would you say as a call to action as we begin to wrap up?
I would say do not lose your sense of compassion and strength, because that is what I'm here, like overwhelming compassion for each other, for circumstances, for all the flaws of our community. And that's hard. It's really hard, especially if you're going through a rough time and you know things feel like they're falling apart. It's hard to be compassionate to others and to give them the grace and to have the strength to say, no, I'm going to be here. I'm going to sit here with you. I'm going to do this thing with you. I'm going to take care of my neighbor. I'm going to help that person who I know is struggling. I will say that New Orleans has the best food, the best music, the best culture, but the absolute best thing that we have is our people in our community. If you have the chance to travel, you can go to a lot of different places in this country, and not a single one has the same sense of community that we do. And that's not just on the parade route, you know, it's not just on the neutral ground for Mardi Gras. We really have that strong sense, and that is what is going to keep us forward, and that is what I hear from you all. So you are the future. We got to get everybody to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. Courtney?
I mean, you guys have said it all, and I'll just say this thing I've heard you say before. I think you have a picture that says it, but for us to be better humans, to be better human beings, because that's one thing that will make a difference. I heard you guys say it before. I'm hearing that compassion, that support, that awareness, and if I start with myself being a better human being to myself, that's going to spill over to me being better to you all, and then being aware of what makes you happy and what brings you down. And so that's my call to action. And for anybody that's tuning into this podcast, to get into our schools. Our scholars want your help and support. Nothing is off the table unless it's off the table, but you know, nothing is off the table in terms of what you can provide and what will make a difference in the lives of our scholars, not just at this table, but across the entire district. So yeah.
I just wanted to say something because I said it earlier when I felt like the community in a whole is clouded. And I say that because here's my analogy. When everyone is born, you're dealt a set of cards. With those cards, no matter what situation you go through, you have to learn how to deal those cards in order for you to succeed. Everyone has a set of cards, so everyone has different cards to play. When you're playing, you're not only playing to win, you're playing to survive. So as you're playing, you have to learn the different components and the different factors that can not only make you win or succeed or survive, but you have to make sure that you leave out of there as a human being. Life itself, it can break you or it can make you become something stronger, but that's all how you do your cards. Everyone has a queen, a king, and all the other cards that I don't name of. But everybody has all those. But it's that one card that really pays attention and really makes you who you are, and that's the ace. Because you are always going to be number one in your own deck of cards. And so whatever you do after that and whatever you put after that, that's the only thing that's going to make or break your game.
Wow.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
So I just want to say that you guys are amazing.
Yep.
And, you know, when I think about, I'm coming into my first year here, and I brag about y'all all the time. I just want you to know
She
that. And, you know, when I think about the work that I've done during my first year here, this has been part of the most amazing journey, just to be able to hear directly from you and to learn from you, and it empowers me. And so I love the compassion and, you know, just this notion that we're all in this together, and the fact that there can't be this division between the young people and the adults. We've got to get on the same page. And, you know, so my call to action to other leaders within our community is to lift up the voices of our young people. You know, when I think about it from a strictly professional strategic planning kind of way, communication is one of our goals, one of our areas for strategic planning, and student voice is on there. And I am committed to continuing this. And, you know, we've got the opportunity to do it virtually. So I know you may not be here because you're going to college or workforce or military, but I hope we can all stay in touch, because this has been a blessing for me. I mean, y'all just don't know. And it really helps level set. Because, when we're doing the work that we're doing in terms of trying to improve schools, it's easy for us to think that we know what you guys need, but it makes a huge difference when we ask. And I'm just so grateful to each and every one of you for being open and sharing with us. So as we wrap up this final episode of Talk Supt for this year, I just want to thank our amazing scholars from Edna Karr. Thank you to our leaders from Edna Karr and Inspire NOLA. Thank you, Dr. Avegno, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All right, so your voices matter, and they're extremely important to me, and I just want you to know that I see you, I hear you, and I love you. And I thank you so much for an amazing first year. Courtney?
Oh, well, it's a wrap. I've enjoyed you guys today. Thank you so much. And we look forward to being back again next school year for Talk Supt Roundtable.
Thanks.